My parents sold their property and handed every dollar, $375,000, to my sister. No call, no warning, not even a short conversation. Just a sudden transfer like it was the most normal thing in the world. I found out the same day they showed up at my front door. Both of them standing there with suitcases in their hands and a look that told me they had already decided how this was going to go. They didn't knock. They didn't ask. They just walked in. The way they moved through my house, it was like they owned it. Like the years I spent working extra shifts to make the down payment, the weekends I gave up to fix it up, the bills I paid every month. None of it existed. They sat down in my living room, started talking about where they'd put their things, and then they told me I should start packing mine. I remember standing there, frozen, not sure if I had even heard them right. My own parents, telling me to leave my home. Not because I had done anything wrong. Not because I couldn't afford it. But because they felt entitled to it. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I could have reminded them that the deed had my name on it, that every square inch of this place was mine. But something in me knew, words wouldn't matter. They had already chosen their side and it wasn't mine. So I went to my room, grabbed a bag and started filling it with clothes. Not because I was ready to give up, but because I knew I needed to walk away for now. It wasn't just about losing a house. It was about losing the people I thought I could count on. Watching my own family turn into strangers right in front of me. Have you ever been pushed out by the very people who were supposed to protect you? That day I walked out the front door with my bag over my shoulder. But I didn't leave empty-handed. I carried something with me, a decision. I wasn't going to forget what they did. And I wasn't going to let it stand. They thought they had won. They had no idea what was coming. I spent that first night at a cheap motel on the edge of town. The kind of place where the walls are thin and the vending machine hums all night. I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes I saw their faces, the way they looked at me when they told me to leave. Like I was just disposable. The next morning I drove back to the neighborhood. Not to go inside but to see if they had actually moved in. They had. My sister's car was in the driveway. Curtains I didn't buy were hanging in the windows. And when I stood across the street I could see her in the kitchen, cooking, laughing with my parents. It hit me, this wasn't just about money. This was about control. They had sold their property, given her the money, and now they wanted my home too. My space. My stability. I knew I couldn't just walk up and take it back. That would be a fight I'd never win. But I also knew something they didn't. Every piece of paperwork, every receipt, every transfer of ownership for that house, it was in my name. And I kept records. That night, I sat on the bed in the motel, pulled out my laptop, and started going through every document I had. Mortgage statements. Utility bills. Property tax receipts. Proof that I wasn't just living there, I owned it outright. But I didn't stop there. I remembered something else. When my parents sold their property, they had asked me to help them with some of the legal forms. I still had copies. And those copies showed something very interesting. They had moved a lot more money than they admitted. Have you ever stumbled across a detail so big it changes the whole game? I realized right then, this wasn't just about kicking me out. There was something bigger, something they didn't want anyone to see. I closed my laptop, leaned back, and for the first time since this started, I smiled. They had taken the first move. But now it was my turn. 2 days later, I went back to work like nothing had happened. On the outside I was calm. On the inside I was planning every step. At lunch I called a real estate lawyer I knew from a past job. His name was Mark. We weren't close friends but we'd done business before and I knew he didn't like being pushed around. "Mark, I need you to pull a full title search on my house," I told him. There was a pause. "Is there a problem?" I smiled to myself. Not for me. But maybe for someone else. He promised to call back in a few hours. When he did, the news was better than I hoped. The house was still entirely in my name. No one could legally move me out. Which meant, my parents and my sister were technically trespassing. I didn't rush. I didn't storm over there. Instead, I thought about what would hurt them most, not in a physical way but in a way they couldn't ignore. I remembered how much my sister bragged about her new home to her friends online. How my parents loved telling people they were finally living comfortably. All lies. That night, I posted something simple on my social media. Funny how some people move into places they don't own and think no one will notice. I didn't tag anyone. I didn't name names. But people talk. By the next morning, 3 mutual friends had already messaged me, asking who I was talking about. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Later that afternoon, I drove by the house again. My sister was outside, pacing on the porch, phone pressed to her ear. My parents were standing in the yard, arguing quietly. I didn't stop the car. I just kept driving. Have you ever watched the first cracks appear in someone's perfect little world? I knew I had them nervous, but that was just the start. I still had the property documents, the proof of their $375,000 transfer, and the extra money they hadn't told anyone about. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about showing them that the person they threw out was the one holding all the cards. And I was just getting started. The next step was quiet. No sudden moves. No confrontation. Just small, careful actions. I started with the utilities. Since everything was still under my name, I called the power company, the water service, and the internet provider. Please switch all accounts to paper billing only, I told them, and send them directly to my mailing address. They agreed without hesitation. It didn't cut anything off, yet. But it meant my parents and my sister wouldn't see a single bill coming to that house. And when the due dates came, only I would know. A week later I got the first stack of bills. Thousands of dollars in charges. I paid nothing. I also went to the county clerk's office. I filed a notice of ownership on the property, attaching the original deed and the most recent title search from Mark. It was public record now, easy for anyone to find. That same afternoon, I sent an anonymous tip to a local real estate blogger. Just a short message. A family just moved into a house they don't own. Might be worth looking into. Within 2 days there was a post online with a blurred photo of my house and the headline, "The Squatters of West Pine Street." No names, but the comments section. It didn't take long for people to figure it out. Have you ever seen pride drain from someone's face in real time? When I drove by again, my sister was inside. Curtains closed. My parents weren't outside gardening like they used to. They were hiding. Mark called me the next morning. "They've called me twice," he said. "They're asking how to get the title changed." I laughed. "Tell them to ask the owner." The owner? Me. But I wasn't finished. I still had the proof of the $375,000 transfer, and the larger hidden amount they thought no one knew about. That money was in a separate account in my parents' names. And they hadn't paid taxes on it. All I had to do was make the right call. This wasn't revenge out of anger anymore. This was justice served cold. And they were about to feel it in a way they'd never forget. I waited for the perfect moment. It came faster than I expected. My sister posted another photo online, this time of my kitchen. She wrote, "Home sweet home." The comments were full of congratulations, people calling her lucky and blessed. I saved that post. That same day I called the IRS tip line. I gave them the exact date of my parents' property sale, the amount of $375,000 they gifted to my sister, and then, the larger sum they had kept quiet about. I told them it was never reported. I didn't have to give my name. Then I emailed the photo of my sister's new home to the same real estate blogger. This time I didn't ask for anonymity. I gave my full name, attached the property deed, and simply wrote, "This is my house." They moved in without permission. The blogger replied within an hour. This just got interesting. By the next morning, the story had a headline. Local family faces questions over unreported property transfer and alleged occupation. It spread fast. People in our town love drama, especially when it involves money and pride. Friends of my parents started calling them, asking what was going on. My sister's social media account went private. Mark called me again. "They're panicking," he said. "I know," I told him. "And I'm not done." That afternoon, I went to the bank where my parents kept their accounts. I didn't touch their money, I didn't need to. I just handed over the legal paperwork showing I was the sole owner of the house and asked the bank to update my address as the official property address. It sounds small, but it wasn't. Every piece of mail tied to that house, insurance, taxes, even HOA notices, now came directly to me. They were living in a place they couldn't claim, cut off from every official channel. Have you ever watched someone realize the life they built was standing on sand? I could feel the shift. They were no longer confident. They weren't acting like owners anymore. And I still had one move left, the one that would end this for good. The final step started with a single envelope. I drafted a formal notice with Mark's help. It was short and simple, just a statement that the property was under my sole ownership, that the current occupants had no legal right to reside there, and that they were required to vacate within 30 days. We sent it by certified mail. Not just once, but to the house, to my parents' mailing address, and even to my sister's workplace. 2 days later I drove past. My father was on the porch, holding the letter in one hand, phone in the other. My mother stood behind him, reading over his shoulder. My sister was inside, pacing again. The phone call started that night. First from my parents, then my sister. I didn't answer. The voicemails were full of excuses, shifting blame, and attempts to play the victim. "Why are you doing this to family?" my mother said in one. "You know we're just trying to live comfortably," my father added in another. I didn't respond. Instead, I made one more move. I contacted the HOA and gave them a copy of my ownership documents. I told them any notices about landscaping, parking violations, or community fees should come directly to me. And if there were unpaid balances, well, they could handle them the usual way. Within a week, the HOA sent a formal violation notice for unpaid dues, over $1,000. The late fees were stacking up. They couldn't ignore it. Have you ever seen the walls close in around someone who thought they'd never face consequences? By the end of that week, the gossip had reached every corner of the neighborhood. People avoided my parents at the store. My sister stopped showing up to her usual coffee spot. Mark called me one evening. "They've started looking for rentals," he said. I just nodded to myself. Good. Let them. The house was mine again, legally, financially, and soon, physically. But I wasn't just taking it back. I was making sure they understood exactly what it meant to take something that wasn't theirs. And the moment they walked out for the last time, I'd be standing there to watch it happen. The eviction deadline was a week away when the real unraveling began. I was driving home from work when I saw my parents' car parked outside a small rental office downtown. Through the glass window, I could see them sitting with an agent, papers spread out on the desk. My sister wasn't there. I didn't stop. I didn't wave. I just kept driving, letting the sight sink in. The people who had walked into my home like they owned it were now filling out rental applications. That night, another article went up from the real estate blogger. This one wasn't subtle. It used my name, the legal documents, and even the eviction notice. The headline read, "Homeowner reclaims property after family occupies without permission." The comments section was brutal. Neighbors, old classmates, even distant relatives were weighing in. Some took my parents' side. Most didn't. By morning, my phone was buzzing nonstop. People wanted the full story. I gave them nothing. Silence was doing more than words ever could. Have you ever noticed how quickly people change when they realize the truth isn't on their side? That week, my sister finally called from a number I didn't recognize. I answered. "You ruined everything," she said, her voice low. "No," I replied, calm and steady. "You did that yourself." There was a pause. She hung up. 3 days before the deadline, I went by the house. My parents' SUV was gone. The curtains were open for the first time in weeks. Inside, boxes were stacked in the living room. My mother was wrapping dishes in newspaper. My father was on his knees, pulling nails from the wall where their photos had hung. I didn't go in. I just stood on the sidewalk, hands in my pockets, watching. They saw me through the window. For a second, nobody moved. Then my father looked away. It was almost over. Mark called that night. "They're set to hand over the keys on Friday." "Good," I said. "I'll be there." Not to gloat. Not to argue. Just to see the moment when they realized I hadn't been weak or scared or helpless. I had been patient. And patience had done more than any fight ever could. Friday morning was cold and bright. I parked across the street from my house, and waited. At exactly 10 o'clock, a moving truck pulled up. My sister climbed out first, avoiding eye contact. My parents followed, both looking smaller than I remembered. They didn't carry themselves like the people who had once walked into this place as if they owned it. I stayed leaning against my car, hands in my pockets, just watching. The movers went in and out, carrying boxes, furniture, the same curtains my sister had bragged about online. Piece by piece, their claim on this place was disappearing. After about an hour, my father stepped outside with a small set of keys in his hand. He walked toward me slowly. For a moment, I thought he might say something. Instead, he just held the keys out. I took them without a word. He looked at me, waiting. I didn't fill the silence. I let it sit there, heavy. Then he nodded once, turned, and walked back to the truck. My mother didn't look up as she passed. My sister kept her eyes on the ground. When the last box was loaded, the truck door slammed shut. They stood there for a second, as if waiting for me to speak. I didn't. They got in their car and drove away. I walked up to the front door and unlocked it. The air inside felt different, like it was finally mine again. I walked through each room slowly, touching the walls, looking at the empty spaces where their things had been. In the kitchen, I opened the drawer where I used to keep my spare keys. Still empty. I smiled. That afternoon, I called the utilities, the HOA, and the county tax office. Every account, every record, every notice was restored to my control. The house was officially and fully mine again. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post anything online. The story had already traveled farther than I ever could have pushed it. This wasn't about humiliating them in public anymore. It was about something quieter, reclaiming what was mine and knowing they'd remember the way it ended for the rest of their lives. Have you ever seen someone walk away from a place they thought they owned, knowing they'll never come back? I have. And I'll never forget it.